Good afternoon. The first item of business is portfolio questions, and the first portfolio this afternoon is Rural Affairs, Land Reform and Islands. And at question number 1, I call Alexander Burnett.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what it is doing to restore salmon numbers in Scotland's rivers, and I refer members to my register of interest regarding the River Dee.
Cabinet Secretary Mary Cushon.
First of all, I just want to outline that I take the issue of declining wild Atlantic salmon populations very seriously. Under our wild salmon strategy and the accompanying implementation plan, we are taking urgent action with partners to ensure the protection and recovery of this iconic species. Most recently, to increase penalties for the most serious and damaging fish crimes through the Natural Environment Scotland Bill through amendments that were passed by Emma Harper and introduced by her. Now, since 2021, we've awarded over £5 million through the Marine Fund Scotland for projects directly benefiting wild salmon, over £8 million through the Nature Restoration Fund to support projects to improve Scotland's freshwater environment, and £12 million over the past 12 years has been invested through the Water Environment Fund on barrier removal and easement projects.
Alexander Burnett.
Now, despite valiant conservation efforts such as the River Dee Board's 1 Million Trees campaign, under the SNP, wild Atlantic salmon have declined by 70% and are now an endangered species. Now, we know wild fisheries contribute over £100 million annually to our national economy, supporting tourism, jobs and local businesses. But Nature Scot are in denial over seal predation, and expensive acoustic solutions are neither workable or affordable. So does the Cabinet Secretary even understand the issue and the impact it's having on our rural economy, or is she content that her legacy will be the extinction of Scotland's iconic wild salmon?
Cabinet Secretary.
I have to say straight off that I don't really appreciate the patronising tone of that supplementary question from Alexander Burnett. And I think also to blame a political party for the decline in a species due to climatic conditions and a whole host of other factors, I think is entirely ridiculous and does not treat this with the seriousness that it deserves. Now, I have already outlined, if the member would care to listen, the work that has been undertaken through the Wild Salmon Strategy and the accompanying implementation plan, the funding that is going towards this. The member may also be interested to know that I will be meeting with the River Dee District Salmon Fishery Board and Trust tomorrow to hear their concerns directly. We work together with them, with our other partners, because we know this needs urgent action, and we are taking the urgent action that's required.
Brief supplementary, Rachel Hamilton.
Thank you. Cabinet Secretary, given that the River Tweed is an iconic salmon river and supports around 24 million to the economy and 500 jobs, what action is the Scottish Government taking to ensure that sewage treatment works and overflows along Tweed are not damaging water quality or undermining salmon recovery?
Cabinet Secretary.
Just to say, I think on those particular points, if Rachel Hamilton would like to follow up with me in writing, and I can get back to her in relation to that, because again, we should be taking all action to try and mitigate any damage there, but I'm happy to look into that in more detail.
Question number 2, Pauline McNeill.
To ask the Scottish Government what financial or practical support has been made available to poultry producers affected by the avian influenza outbreak.
Minister Jim Fairley.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Scottish Government pays compensation for healthy birds that are humanely culled in order to prevent the spread of avian influenza. Compensation payments are based on a GB table of valuations, which are reviewed and updated regularly to ensure they reflect current costs and different production systems. The practical support is provided by the Animal and Plant Health Agency, who are the Scottish Government's lead operational partner, and they provide support directly to owners of premises affected by avian flu as part of the disease control response. And that includes on-farm support as part of the disease control activities and detailed advice on biosecurity.
Pauline McNeill.
One of the biggest egg producers in the country, Glenrath Farms, has been hit by multiple outbreaks of bird flu, and as early as 2026 in Glasgow, customers have been struggling to purchase eggs due to the bird flu, with several supermarkets, including Asda and Tesco, having no eggs available on the shelves, and some retailers have limited sales to 2 boxes. I've actually experienced this myself in recent times. Given that, what long-term preventative strategy is the Government putting in place to protect the poultry sector from the recurring avian influenza outbreaks, and perhaps raising some public awareness about the importance of this to their daily shop?
Minister.
Well, Pauline McNeill is absolutely correct to point out the fact that we have had a quite a large outbreak of avian influenza this year. There's been 1.5 million hens have been culled since November of 2025. But there is also more resilience in the national flock than there has been for a while. An article in The Scotsman on the 29th of January quoted Nick Allen, who is the Chief Executive of the British Egg Council. And he said, in terms of supply, the national laying flock is currently in a stronger and more resilient position than it has been for a number of years, so we do not anticipate this incident resulting in shortages for customers. But the Scottish Retail Consortium also represents major supermarkets north of the border, said grocery retailers have become accustomed to a degree of supply chain disruption from bird flu and other events in recent years, and they adapt accordingly. But the point that she makes about long-term resilience, avian flu is a natural occurring issue. It's something that keepers should be aware of. They should be ensuring that their biosecurity is in hand, and that way they'll protect their own flocks.
Brief supplementary, Evan Teed.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can the Minister remind the Chamber of the vital importance of stringent biosecurity measures when it comes to protecting poultry flocks from avian influenza?
Minister.
I'm very glad that Evelyn Tweed's brought that point up, because at the end of my last answer there is very good practical biosecurity advice, and I should have said that, on how to protect your birds on the gov.scot avian influenza web pages. That's cleaning footwear before and after visiting birds, placing birds' food and water in fully enclosed areas that are protected from wild birds, and removing spilled feed regularly. It's important to prevent the incursion and spread of avian flu, and if farmers carry out these things, then they'll be able to protect their stock better.
Question number 3, Elena Whittam, who's joining us remotely. Ms Whittam.
To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on how its Good Food Nation journey encourages local procurement, promotes local produce and reduces food miles.
Cabinet Secretary.
Our first National Good Food Nation plan was published on the 17th of December and represents how we will work collectively across government to meet our Good Food Nation ambitions. Now, public procurement is key to ensuring that everyone has access to healthy, fresh, seasonal food. We are committed to exploring all legislative and policy opportunities to maximise the impact procurement can have for public bodies and our excellent Scottish produce. Now, our Good Food Nation plan now contains information that directs suppliers towards resources to help them participate in public procurement, including specific support for SMEs and third sector organisations.
Elena Whittam.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. Could she advise how the Scottish Government is supporting the prioritisation of local Scottish food and public procurement? And does this include supporting the investment in regional processing facilities and food hubs that are publicly or community owned, which strengthen local food resilience and further community wealth building aspirations?
Cabinet Secretary.
I really welcome the question that's been put forward by Elena Whittam today, because I think it raises some really important points, and I think I would just want to outline that our local food resilience and community wealth building aspirations are realised, strengthened and supported in a number of ways. I think one of the ways that we do that is through our Food for Life programme, which we've supported for a number of years, and that's really about trying to increase healthy, locally sourced produce in our schools and local authorities. And the programme has also supported our Guyland Butte Council in partnership with Wild Jura Limited to supply venison products into local schools across Island Jura. We'd also been working with the Soil Association and Food for Life to really try and expand that more broadly across the public sector. And there was a specific pilot project that had been looking at doing that in Glasgow in particular. But I think there is so much that we try to do within the regulations in which we have to operate, and a number of ways in which we're also supporting our local food resilience. And I think some good examples of that are through the Small Producers Pilot Fund, where we've been supporting private kill in our abattoirs and been providing funding there, because we know that's so critical in that local supply chain, but also the capital funding that we're supplying, making available for our small producers too.
Thank you. And supplementary, Roger Grant, who's joining us remotely.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Cabinet Secretary brought forward a statutory instrument on the Good Food Nation plan last year, and she's aware that there was real concerns that it was drawn very narrowly, omitting such crucial sectors such as agriculture and fisheries. Can I ask if she's had time to reflect on this, and does she plan to expand the scope of the instrument?
Cabinet Secretary.
First of all, I think I would want to be clear that the SSI that had been introduced at that time was framed in a very particular way and focused on specified functions, and it needed to be framed in that way so that the Good Food Nation plan would be taken into consideration when those specific powers and functions were exercised. So I think to say that it didn't include agriculture and fisheries isn't necessarily the case, because it was to be considered through the Rural Support Plan. It was also to be considered in the National Marine Plan too. Now, again, of course, we're taking into consideration the views that were heard during discussion on that SSI, but of course it's not possible for me to introduce an SSI with the time that's left in this session. But of course that work is going to continue, because we want to make sure that when the Good Food Nation plan is taken into consideration, it's done so in a meaningful way that is actually going to have that tangible impact.
Question number 4, Stuart McMillan.
Now to ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on the procurement of marine protection vessels for Marine Scotland.
Cabinet Secretary.
The Scottish Government remains committed to replacing its protection and research vessels, with MPV Minna and MRV Scotia both approaching the point for renewal. Now, a private information notice was issued last year to signal the future opportunity to the market, and the next step is issuing a single procurement document. Before that happens, wider consideration is being given across government to vessel procurement routes and subsidy control, including implications for publicly owned shipyards. It is important that ministers take decisions on all vessel programmes on a consistent and legally robust basis.
Stuart McMillan.
Thank the Cabinet Secretary for that reply, and the Cabinet Secretary will be very much aware of our correspondence and discussions surrounding the replacement of the existing vessels, and I believe that Ferguson Marine is perfectly placed to deliver these vessels, as also has experience after building the MPV Minna in 2003 and the MPV Jura in 2005. Allocating the direct award would be a boost for the workforce and also begin to provide a pipeline of orders. So can the Cabinet Secretary advise if ministers are actively pursuing this approach and when a decision will be made?
Cabinet Secretary.
First of all, just to say I appreciate the interest that has been shown in this by Stuart McMillan, and I know that he has written to me in relation to this too. Now, of course, the Scottish Government is committed to supporting Ferguson Marine. However, we haven't made any decisions regarding the contracting rates for the marine protection and the research vessels. Any contract award, whether that's through competition or whether it's through direct award, has to comply with really stringent procurement and subsidy control requirements to avoid the risk of legal challenge. And direct awards within the shipbuilding sector are particularly complex due to the sensitivity of the industry under the UK Subsidy Control Act, as well as the highly competitive nature of the global market. So ministers will consider each vessel contract in due course, ensuring that any chosen route to market is lawful, is robustly assessed and capable of withstanding comprehensive legal scrutiny.
Stuart McMillan. Oh, I beg your pardon, we've already had Mr McMillan's contribution. Apologies. A brief supplementary. Paul Sweeney.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. The Scottish Government hasn't placed a contract for a ship in Scotland in the last decade now, and we are facing a significant challenge to the future of Ferguson Marine. There is a remedy with the procurement of these particular vessels, because although they aren't naval vessels, they do have an obvious national security application. And I know that UK Government ministers are interested in discussions with the Scottish Government about applying Section 45 of the Subsidy Control Act in relation to this procurement, and would look at options to do so. So will the Minister actively engage with UK Government officials and ministers on the option of securing a Section 45 exemption and direct award to Ferguson Marine?
Cabinet Secretary.
I think I would say in relation to that in the question from Paul Sweeney, and he'll be aware that I think I've answered questions in relation to this from previously. Now, of course, when it comes to defence and national security, that is, of course, reserved to the UK Government, and Scotland doesn't commission independent naval vessels. Now, the design of these replacement vessels reflects the operational needs of the Marine Directorate. It doesn't include warship specifications or military capability, which could misrepresent their authority at sea. And MPVs are built and operated to merchant vessel standards, with Crown servant crews accountable to Scottish ministers. So, as merchant-class vessels, they fall outside the defence-related exemptions that are referenced by Section 45 of the Subsidy Control Act.
And brief supplementary, Tim Eagle.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. There is no doubt that obviously marine protection and enforcement is important. But following the removal of the Air Task aircraft based at Inverness, I still worry that that has taken a hit. Does the Cabinet Secretary believe that new vessels, when they come, will ensure we have strong protections and monitoring in place, given that loss of experience and the speed of response that we once had at Inverness Airport?
Cabinet Secretary.
I think it's not correct to frame it in that way, because we do actually have additional capabilities through what we have at less of a cost. So I think I need to be clear on that point in terms of the aerial surveillance that we still have access to. So we still have the same number of hours under the new contract with the ability to add more to that. So again, it's not diminishing the capabilities that we have. If anything, our capabilities are being enhanced through the use of new technologies such as drones, which I've outlined in discussions in the Natural Environment Bill too. But of course, we're always looking to increase and make improvements, particularly in relation to these vessels too, because I do agree, I think that's the capabilities are really important. We have a large marine area to cover, and we need to make sure we've got all those aspects in place.
Question number 5, Liam MacArthur.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what engagement it's had with the Agricultural Sector in Orkney on changes being made to ecological focus area activities.
Minister Jim Fairley.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Scottish Government has had extensive engagement the extensive engagement has ensured that enhanced greening requirements are proportionate for farmers, crofters and small farms. We have worked with stakeholder organisations, including the NFU for Scotland and Scottish Crofters Federation. We've involved farmers and crofters directly through user research and workshops with advisors across Scotland, including in Orkney. This collaborative approach has led to the introduction of 4 new ecological focus areas and updates to existing EFAs, providing greater flexibility to reflect the diversity of farming systems, including local practices in Orkney. Advisors in Orkney also secured funding to analyse academic modelling specific to the islands and organised roadshows to help farmers and crofters prepare for the changes. 2 letters, a targeted email, articles in the Scottish Farmer, social media posts and the Farm Advisory Service videos and webinars have all raised awareness. The greening scheme of £142 million worth of budget supports agriculture and the environment, and that complements the other significant support packages that the Scottish Government continues to provide, which is in stark contrast to policies elsewhere in the UK.
Liam MacArthur.
Thank you, and can I thank the Minister for his response. Farmers in Orkney have consistently raised with me their concerns about the EFA proposals, from the impact an increase to 7% of all land will have on the overlap with existing agri-environment schemes, to the lack of suitable options for grassland systems such as those used in Orkney. I know the Minister is very well aware of those concerns and the calls indeed for an island exemption. If he does not believe such an exemption is either possible or justified, what further steps will he now take to ensure the EFA obligations are properly island-proofed?
Minister.
Well, as the member is well aware, we've had many discussions about what the EFA is actually going to do, and we included 4 new options, and there was specific work done for the Orkney Islands. I don't think it's too much to ask, because clearly, previously, when the first EFAs were brought in 2015, there was a huge upsurge of people saying that this is a disaster, it won't work. By 2016, once people had understood exactly what was being asked of them, there was no other issues. So I recently met with 2 young Arcadians who came down to speak to me directly to raise these issues, and I had the conversation with them. We went through all the options that are available to them, and I've asked them, just please do this in good faith. Let's see where we go, and if in 2 or 3 years' time there's an issue, then we'll come back to look at it. But right now we're asking farmers to do more, but we're taking very clear action to make sure we protect farmers, particularly in Orkney, particularly with the numbers of livestock units that are in Orkney, and I think we're going in the right direction, and we'll do that in collaboration with the farming community.
Question number 6, Ruth McGuire.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government when it will implement remote electronic monitoring on vessels fishing in Scottish waters.
Cabinet Secretary.
From the 7th of March 2026, all relevant pelagic vessels fishing in Scottish waters must have an REM system on board. For Scottish registered pelagic vessels, this requirement applies regardless of where they are operating. It's already a legislative requirement for all scallop dredge vessels operating in Scottish waters to have an REM system on board. As part of the development of the Scottish-led demersal fisheries management plans, we've committed to developing a roadmap for further rollout of REM in priority fisheries around the UK, with clear prioritisation criteria and an implementation timetable. These fisheries management plans are currently subject to public consultation.
Ruth McGuire.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. Some vessels, in particular long line vessels and gill netters, pose a significant threat to seabirds. Does the Minister agree that this key tool can fill data gaps and help reduce the bycatch of seabird species such as fulmar, northern gannet and Manx shearwater? And further to that, that its implementation can benefit fishermen who are operating in accordance with the best practice by evidencing sustainable practices through objective, verifiable data?
Cabinet Secretary.
I would absolutely agree with that last point, and that's where I think it's great that here in Scotland we've been leading on that, because it's also technology that other nations have been looking at too. Now, I think what I would say in relation to the wider use of remote electronic monitoring technologies, it is going to help us better monitor fishing operations, effort and catch, and help us to deliver on our obligations to minimise and, where possible, eliminate bycatch of seabirds and other sensitive species as part of our wider efforts to ensure the sustainability of our fishing fleet. Now, we do have observer programmes that are in place across the UK that collect the data on the incidental bycatch of protected species. That includes seabirds in commercial fishing vessels, and there is a focus on fisheries and those regions that are of high risk. And I do think that further rollout of remote electronic monitoring beyond the scallop and pelagic fleet segments, that is also being planned, and options are going to be developed for that alongside our future catching policy work.
And brief supplementary, Finlay Carson.
Given that members of the Scottish Scallop Fleet report they still have no access to REM data gathered in their own vessels, despite being told it would support and improve their operations, and that the cost of maintaining REM equipment is rising year on year, what assurances can the Government give that this system will deliver any practical benefit to fishers, and when will the Scallop Fleet finally be given access to their own data?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, first of all, I would just want to say that I think I was under the I was in the understanding that scallop vessels could access their data through the REM equipment that they have on their vessels. But if there is an issue there, I would appreciate if Finlay Carson could follow up with me so I could look at that in more detail. I appreciate the point are being raised as well, and the concerns that have been expressed, I think, around the cost of REM systems. Of course, that's not something that the Scottish Government can influence, because that is up to the REM providers themselves. But I would say that vessels can, of course, use alternative providers as long as it meets the technical specifications. But again, if Finlay Carson could write to me so that I can look into any issues that he's hearing directly, and then I can follow up with him with a more detailed response.
Question number 7 has not been lodged. Question number 8, Edward Mountain.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And I remind members of my register of interest in that I own a farm in Murray, which includes some trees, to ask the Scottish Government whether its tree planting targets for 25-26 will be reached.
Cabinet Secretary.
We are currently in the middle of the tree planting season, and reporting on the tree planting target is provided by official statistics on woodland creation, which will be published by Forest Research on the 25th of June. Therefore, I'm not able to comment on the final position at this time.
Edward Mountain.
And I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. But for us in Scotland to get back on track, every year between now and 2029, we'll need to plant another 3,277 hectares per year, over and above the Scottish Government's 15,000 hectares per year that's already been set. That's roughly 7 million more trees each year. I personally doubt that will be achievable, making our net zero targets unachievable. And it won't be achievable unless we have further grant aid and a reduction in bureaucracy. Will the Cabinet Secretary commit to driving forward the latter, which was started by Fergus Ewing some 5 years ago?
Cabinet Secretary.
First of all, I would say I think it is achievable. I know that Edward Mountain, his capacity as convener of the Net Zero Committee, has been looking at the climate change plan. I was obviously appearing at the Rural Affairs Committee in relation to the aspects of the climate change plan that relate to my own portfolio. And within that, we've set out our planting targets for the next few years. And together with the budget for this coming financial year, as well as the spending review period, we have the funding to match those targets and for that to be delivered. So again, I think those targets are achievable. We have the budget there to deliver it. So now we just need to get on and do that.
And brief supplementary, Mercedes Viala.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer, and I apologise for being late to the Chamber today. What proportion of the trees planted towards that target were or will be native broadleaf species versus invasive non-native species such as Sitka spruce?
Cabinet Secretary.
I think in relation to, obviously I can't speak for the planting going forward, but I think in relation to what we've planted so far, I think in recent years that's roughly been about half of what's been planted has been native. But again, I want to make sure I've got that absolutely right so I can follow up with Mercedes Villalba. I think our target was for about 40%, but again, I think we have gone over and above that.
Thank you, Cabinet Secretary. That concludes portfolio questions on rural affairs, land reform and islands. There will be a very brief pause before we move on to the next item of business to allow frontbench teams to change position. Thank you. Thank you. The next portfolio this afternoon is Health and Social Care. I would remind members that questions 3 and 7 are grouped together and that therefore I shall take any supplementaries on these questions after both have been answered. And at question number 1, I call Alistair Allen, who is joining us remotely.
To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on its discussions with NHS Western Isles regarding dental provision across the islands.
Minister Jenny Minto.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Officials are currently meeting with the Director of Dentistry for Western Isles monthly to understand local service provision and concerns. We recognise that access remains more challenging in rural and island areas, which is why our Operational Improvement Plan commits to reviewing and refreshing the existing financial incentives available to the dental sector to better support patient access in rural and island areas. This work is currently underway and we anticipate revised incentives will be introduced in the 2026-27 financial year.
Alistair Allen.
I thank the Minister for that response and appreciate the work that the Scottish Government is undertaking to improve the situation. However, people in many communities across the Western Isles have not been able to get on a waiting list for a local dentist for a number of years, much less access check-up appointments or anything other than extremely urgent dental care. Prevention is obviously far preferable to later treatment, and so can the Minister outline what steps are being taken to ensure that all my constituents are able to begin accessing regular check-ups and routine dental work on the NHS?
Minister.
I thank Dr Allen for his supplementary question. As I noted in my earlier answer, we are committed to the review and refresh of financial incentives to support the workforce and patient access in rural and island areas, and this work is at an advanced stage. It is my hope that once in force, the revised allowances will encourage renewed uptake of high street provision in the island areas, such as the Western Isles, and support patients in engaging in regular check-ups and routine dental work.
Supplementary, Rhoda Grant.
Presiding Officer, there are 5 major dental vacancies across the Outer Hebrides, including 3 in Euston Barra, and this also includes a critical senior dental officer role. Patients who can't register with a dentist are being told not to make emergency appointments unless they cannot sleep due to the pain. I understand there are issues with ventilation and fallow time in the surgeries, which limit the number of daily appointments taken. Can I ask what the Minister is doing to address these issues and to ensure that dentists are recruited and retained, and that surgeries are upgraded to allow a continuous flow of patients?
Minister.
I thank Rhoda Grant for her follow-up question. As I indicated in my answer to Dr Allen, we are in the process of reviewing the dental access improvement schemes and the funding that's available to dentists to ensure that practices are set up. That is an important part of the work that we need to do. But I'd also like to highlight that I'm disappointed about the visa restrictions that the UK Government has put on dental technicians, which would allow us to improve our workforce within Scotland and actually across the UK to ensure that people are getting the right support from their dentists as they need.
And brief supplementary, Paul Sweeney.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. I was quite shocked to read over the weekend that all dental practices in the Outer Hebrides are now shut to new adult patients. This just seems to be yet another extreme example of a failure for substantial workforce planning, leading to island residents once again paying the price. It's clear that simply changing incentives isn't going to be good enough in some of these more remote areas. Could the Minister consider expansion of public dental provision so there's direct salary dental vacancies created on the island?
Minister.
I think I've been clear in responses to other questions that I've had in the Chamber that we are willing to look at whatever solutions they are. We have currently reviewed, as we did 2 years ago, the fees that dentists receive, which has improved uptake for dentists, but we're also reviewing the governance as well to ensure that we can get as many dentists in Scotland as we need, as well as improving and increasing the intake as dental students in the universities.
Question number 2, Tim Eagle.
To ask the Scottish Government what plans it has to increase the number of available beds in Dr Gray's Hospital in Elgin and throughout NHS Grampian facilities.
Cabinet Secretary Neil Gray.
Presiding Officer, it's for NHS boards and their planning partners to design and deliver healthcare services that meet the needs of the local populations they serve, consistent with national policies, frameworks and best practice. NHS Grampian is making good progress under new leadership, and its escalation improvement plan to stabilise services and release capacity by improving hospital flow across its sites, not least through this government's additional investment in initiatives to effectively shift the balance of care, such as hospital at home, frailty services and discharge to assess.
Tim Eagle.
I think behind all of that question is really just pass the buck. The Cabinet Secretary must know that corridor care is now commonplace, and that's having a massive effect on patients and staff. Dr Gray's is regularly operating beyond funded bed numbers, and that's putting more and more pressure on. I understand that NHS Grampian currently has the lowest bed base in Scotland at around 1.4 beds per 1,000. The long-term declining capacity is contributing to pressures. Will the Government set out why, after another year has passed, we still not have increased bed capacity, and what immediate steps the Government can do to make sure that we ensure patients are treated with the dignity and that staff are supported with the resources they need?
Cabinet Secretary.
Officer, it is a statutory responsibility for NHS boards to plan and design and deliver the healthcare services that meets the needs of the local population. It's their responsibility. However, he will be aware that we have escalated NHS Grampian to level 4 for both their financial and elements of their performance. And through that escalation process, we are looking at precisely the types of areas that Mr Eagle suggests. I am confident in the progress that is being made under the new leadership of Laura Scaife-Knight, and that the assurance process is ensuring that both performance and their financial performance is improving.
Question number 3, Jackie Timber.
To ask the Scottish Government what action it has taken to reduce NHS waiting times through its draft budget 2026-27.
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, through this year's targeted investment in planned care, we have seen waits over 52 weeks reduce for 7 consecutive months. I want to maintain momentum and build on this progress, which is why our draft budget for 2026-27 includes a record almost £22.5 billion for health and social care. We will scale up productivity and efficiency programmes to create additional capacity, and health boards have also been directed to take forward a new collaborative subnational planning approach, which will see boards work together to best use and optimise available capacity to ensure patients receive the care that they need as soon as possible.
Jackie Timber.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. It's welcome that this SNP Scottish Government has taken bold, decisive action in our NHS, which is seeing waiting times down for a 7th month in a row, as he said, while waiting lists remain high in Labour-run NHS England. Can the Cabinet Secretary therefore advise how the Scottish Government will continue to build upon this success, particularly through investment in our innovative GP walk-in centres?
Cabinet Secretary.
Absolutely. I thank Jackie Dunbar for that question. Her question is timely, particularly that latter part, because today marks the opening of Scotland's first GP walk-in service pilot, a milestone in improving access to care. This is a £36 million pilot programme, with 15 services being rolled out initially across Scotland. These services will allow people with minor, urgent, non-emergency needs to see a clinician the same day without the 8 AM rush for appointments. They're staffed by GPs, by advanced nurse practitioners, and focus on minor, urgent issues that can't wait but don't need A&E. They're not a replacement for someone's own GP for things like long-term conditions. They are complementing existing practices.
Question number 7, George Adam.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update regarding NHS waiting times.
Cabinet Secretary.
Officer, the latest published stats show the sustained progress we are making in reducing waiting times, with long waits reductions for the 7th month in a row. In the 12 months to December 2025, there were 274,638 operations performed, a 5.6% increase from the previous 12 months. New outpatient waits over 52 weeks have reduced by 40.1% between July and December. Long waits for inpatient and day case procedures have fallen every month since July, and waits over 52 weeks decreased by 23.9% over that period. These latest figures show our plan is delivering for the people of Scotland, and I am committed to continue to maintain momentum and build on this progress.
George Adam.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer, and perhaps Jackie Dunbar and I should communicate more often with each other. But it's always good to tell people good news more than once, right enough. So can the Cabinet Secretary advise how the Scottish Government will continue to drive down these waiting times?
Cabinet Secretary.
I remember the former Speaker of the House of Commons, John Bercow, saying that repetition was not a novelty in politics, and George Adam is certainly living up to that today. This year we've provided over £135.5 million to reduce waiting times, with a further £20 million allocated in the last quarter to support boards in targeting specialties with the longest waits. I want to maintain that momentum, build on that progress. That's why our budget includes a record almost £22.5 billion for health and social care, and why we're working closely with boards to increase and optimise capacity and efficiency, improve productivity to ensure that patients receive the care they need as soon as possible. And we've commissioned over 50,000 diagnostics tests and procedures through our national treatment centres and the Golden Jubilee University Hospital in 26-27.
Supplementary, Brian Whittle.
Thank you very much, Deputy Presiding Officer. I've recently, in fact today, spoke to the Royal College of Emergency Medicine, spoke to the Royal College of Midwives, the Royal College of Nurses and the BMA, and they paint a very different picture than the one the Cabinet Secretary is alluding to. They talk about corridor care, they talk about staff not being able to deliver the care that they want to, they talk about staff harm and patient harm. They say there are no beds available. So when will we fix the whole system so that the back door of the hospital is sorted so that beds become available?
Cabinet Secretary.
Officer, in terms of our approach to turning the health service round and making sure it continues to turn the corner that it has done over recent months is by looking at the whole system. Brian Whittle is absolutely right, and I'm sure he recognises the progress that has been made in elective waiting times. That is substantial and demonstrable. However, I also recognise the concerns that there is from the likes of RCEM, who I meet regularly and routinely, as well as the other colleagues that he references, around the areas that still need to see progress. And the accident emergency waiting times this week demonstrate the fact that there is still more to be done, and that measure, which is for the whole system, shows that there is more to be done across the whole system, not just within our accident emergency departments. They are incredibly efficient, but the wider system, including social care, needs to ensure that it is picking up the same productivity gains as we're seeing in an elective capacity.
Supplementary, Jackie Bailey.
Spin is clearly not a novelty with the SNP government, because the First Minister said he would end waits of more than a year by March this year. Yet, according to Public Health Scotland, there were almost 63,000 waits of over a year and more than 8,000 waits of over 2 years, compared to just a few hundred in England. Does the Minister accept that the First Minister has broken yet another promise and patients are waiting too long for treatment? And is this the usual case of the SNP promising the world but delivering absolutely nothing?
Cabinet Secretary.
I think, given the fact that recent revelations show that the NHS in England has been paying trusts to incentivise them to remove patients from lists, is probably not the best route for Ms Bailey to go down in terms of comparison between Scotland and England, because we certainly do not deploy that tactic here in Scotland. We are making demonstrable progress in reducing waiting times, not by incentivising our boards to remove patients from lists, but by increasing capacity and increasing on-patient delivery.
Question number 4, Graham Simpson.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government what steps it is taking to reduce waiting times for cancer patients.
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, performance for the 31-day standard is 95.1%, which is above the 95% target, with the median wait for treatment being 2 days. just 2 days. We're investing £14.24 million of the £137 million planned care funding made available in 25-26 directly to cancer waiting times, supported by increasing radiology capacity to support 7-day working, publishing and implementing optimal diagnostic pathways for lung, head and neck and colorectal cancers, with a total of almost £7.5 million investment to ensure patients have cancer ruled out in or out faster. And we're also have established the 6 rapid cancer diagnostic services, helping us to find particularly the hardest to spot cancers fastest.
Graeme Simpson.
Can I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer? Waiting times for the most serious cancer cases could be reduced if we caught people early. And that's why we need a national screening programme for lung cancer, not the pilots that the Scottish Government has promised. It's available to people aged between 55 and 74 in England who have ever smoked, and 77% of lung cancer is now diagnosed at stage 1 or 2 compared to stage 4 in Scotland. It saves lives and it saves money, and I want to see it throughout Scotland. So can the Cabinet Secretary say when we will get a national lung cancer screening programme here?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, I recognise that there has been some progress made in England in terms of a lung screening programme. It is not consistent and it's not universal, because there are challenges in terms of being able to stand that up. Those challenges are ones that we are seeking to overcome on a consistent national and universal basis, so that we do have the lung screening programme that we have committed to up and running as fast as possible. I can give him that assurance, as I did at the Cancer Conference recently, that we are looking at every possible step to expedite a lung screening programme on a universal basis here in Scotland, for the very reasons that Graeme Simpson outlines, that absolutely it can save lives.
Question number 5, Neil Bibby.
Scottish Government when it last met Renfrewshire Health and Social Care Partnership, and what issues were discussed?
Minister Tom Arthur.
Scottish Government ministers and officials meet regularly with representatives of all health and social care partnerships. The Renfrewshire Health and Social Care Partnership representative attended the Collaborative Response and Assurance Group on Monday of this week. The meeting focused on delayed discharge performance. Scottish Government officials met with Renfrewshire Health and Social Care Partnership on the 8th of April 2025. A number of issues were discussed, including local system pressures, financial challenges and engagement.
Neil Bibby.
I thank the Minister for that answer. Social care is in crisis under the SNP, and vulnerable people across Scotland are paying the price. As the Minister will know, as a Renfrewshire MSP, in Renfrewshire alone there are proposals to cut respite support, cut support for those with autism, and close vital facilities like the Disability Resource Centre in Paisley. After public pressure, decisions on these proposals have been delayed until after the election in June. The First Minister has refused my request to step in and stop these cuts, and the Scottish Government's budget does nothing to help the social care crisis. So can I ask the Minister, why aren't the Government doing anything to prevent these cuts, which are going to impact the most vulnerable people in Renfrewshire?
Minister.
Well, I thank Mr Bibby for bringing these important matters to the Chamber, and government officials and ministers, including the Cabinet Secretary, are committed to ongoing engagement. The draft budget before Parliament is committing over £15.7 billion to local government and almost £22.5 billion to health and social care. Decisions for integrated joint boards, of course, are for integrated joint boards to take. That is the view that Parliament ultimately came to about where responsibility and accountability should lie. But the government is, of course, continued to ongoing engagement, and, of course, there is always the opportunity through the annual budget process for members of all parties to put forward their views on the overall allocation of resources to both local government and health and social care.
Supplementary, Claire Hoggy.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I fear Mr Bibby is not aware of the irony with which his question is tainted, as just last week his own colleagues quietly submitted a motion to annul voting rights for disabled people and unpaid carers on IJB, such as Renfrewshire's, and therefore decide how the funding which Mr Bibby references is spent. Will the Minister join me in calling out Scottish Labour for politicising our health and social care services once again? And will he outline how all IJBs will be funded in a way which best meets the needs of all service users over the next financial year?
Minister.
Can I thank Claire Hawkey for her supplementary question? I was somewhat surprised, perplexed and frankly appalled that a motion was submitted by the Labour Party to annul the order which would extend voting rights to lived experience members. However, I am pleased that the Labour Party has seen sense and withdrawn the motion, or, to use another phrase, made a U-turn. And I do agree that Labour colleagues should be explaining to groups with lived experience, those who use social care, unpaid carers, third sector organisations, why it is they sought to annul IGB voting rights. But it is, of course, for Labour to explain that. Presiding Officer, the Government is determined to ensure those who access and support community health and social care services have an equal say in shaping the decisions that affect our communities. And that's why we have moved to deliver on extending IGB voting rights, despite the Labour Party trying to block it.
And brief supplementary, Carol Mockin.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. This Government have provided no extra funding to IGBs to support any of this work, and the Minister will know that this is proper procedure for me to be able to discuss these matters and bring to the attention of the Parliament issues from the trade unions, from COSLA, from local government. If you cared at all, you would be prepared to talk properly about how we discuss these matters and make sure that we can have these discussions like adults.
Minister.
The member may have a point if it wasn't for the fact I spent a considerable amount of time at committee last week discussing these very members. Now, I accept the arguments around process, for which I provided reassurance and explained the work that the Government is undertaking in that regard. The question here was one of principle. Do you stand with unpaid carers? Do you stand with people who use social care? Do you stand with the third sector? And Labour, once again, stood against them.
And always through the chair. Question number 6, Willie Coffey.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government what progress has been made on the redress scheme as recommended in the 2024 Hughes report to compensate people in Scotland who were harmed by sodium valproate.
Minister Jenny Minto.
Presiding Officer, the UK Government has still not responded to the Hughes report. 2 years after the report's publication, this delay is unreasonable and unfair for affected people and their families. I made this point strongly when I met last month with the UK Health Minister, Dr Ahmed, but the Scottish Government has still not received any proposals for financial redress schemes that would support implementation of Dr Hughes's recommendations. We stand ready to consider any proposals and to work constructively on a four-nation basis.
Willie Coffey.
Thank the Minister for that answer. Presiding Officer, my constituents Charlie and Caroline McCarroll, who are in the gallery today, have been fighting for years for justice for their daughter Claire and many others who have been harmed by sodium valproate, a drug given to pregnant women at risk of epilepsy. The UK Government has had the Cumberledge report for 6 years and now the Hughes report for 2 years, which recommends that a redress scheme be introduced. But this still has not been agreed, leaving victims waiting and wondering if they will ever get any justice from the Government for the harm that was done to their children. Can the Minister assure us and families like the McCarrolls and potentially thousands of other families that the Scottish Government will continue to press the UK Government on this matter, and if that Government continues to let the families down, consider what action we can take here in Scotland to help right this terrible wrong?
Minister.
I absolutely recognise how difficult and distressing this situation continues to be for affected individuals and their families, and I was very pleased to be able to meet and speak to Mr Coffey's constituents, the McCarrolls, earlier in Parliament. As Willie Coffey will know, there was a debate in Westminster Hall this morning. As I understand it, the DHSC Minister gave no new undertakings on redress and no commitment on the timing of a response. This is greatly disappointing, despite calls from the Scottish Government and the other devolved nations for actions. I recognise there is cross-party support here in this Parliament, so I would hope that Labour colleagues in this Parliament would work with us to encourage their Labour colleague, Minister Ahmed, to finally take action. We remain firmly committed to push for a resolution. I remain ready to work with the UK Government and will continue to push them to provide clarity about their position on financial redress. In parallel, the Chief Pharmaceutical Officer is exploring how to support people harmed by valproate might be improved in Scotland.
And brief supplementary, Jackson Carlo.
The Minister, of course, refers to the second anniversary of the Hughes report, and embedded in the Hughes report was the redress scheme recommended in respect of mesh women, as well as that with the condition we've just heard. There was cross-party support across all of the parties in this chamber. We stood united as a Parliament. I do hope, and the Minister will exercise some influence, and that our Labour colleagues here will find some spine to actually stand up to the UK Government and say this must not be another U-turn.
Minister.
I agree with what Jackson Carlo has said and would like to reflect on the important work that he has done to make sure that women that are living with the consequences of mesh implants remain at the forefront of all our thoughts. I have met on a number of occasions, and my officials have met on a number of occasions with the UK officials to try and move this forward. And as I said in my earlier response, I met, along with my colleagues in Wales and Northern Ireland, with Minister Ahmed to try and push this forward. Certainly the three nations are working together in this.
Question number 8, Evelyn Tweed.
To ask the Scottish Government what assessment is made of any impact on NHS Scotland of complications arising from surgeries carried out abroad by patients upon their return to Scotland.
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, the Scottish Government has not undertaken an assessment of the impact on NHS Scotland of complications arising from surgeries abroad. NHS Scotland provides emergency care based on patient need, regardless of where previous treatment was received. If complications from procedures undertaken abroad require NHS treatment, information on whether prior surgery was undertaken abroad is not routinely nor systematically recorded, and so the impact cannot be quantified. The Scottish Government encourages patients to consider the risks of treatment abroad and to ensure aftercare arrangements are in place.
Evelyn Tweed.
Further, has there been any engagement with UK counterparts regarding improving public awareness of the risks of travelling abroad for surgery?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, we have shared our concerns on this important issue directly with the UK Government and other devolved governments for some time, and we are continuing to discuss with them how best we can all protect public safety, given the implications that Evelyn Tweed raises.
Thank you, Cabinet Secretary. That concludes portfolio questions on health and social care. There will be a short pause before we move on to the next item of business to allow frontbench teams to change position. Thank you.